it's two kind of problems. We have to put the waste somewhere, right?
Right.
And so we need the landfills for that purpose. But invariably, we also have to think about how to reduce the amount, right? Through SB 1383, which was the short lived climate pollutant bill, which is facilitated by Cal Recycle. They are looking at ways to incentivize landfill diversion practices to try and reduce the amount of waste going to those landfills to address that kind of problem. And so, H Cycle, we see ourselves as a potential partner and solution in helping to address those particular issues for that very reason.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today, we're glad to be joined by Quentin Foster, Vice President of H Cycle LLC. Quentin, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for the invitation to be here.
No worries. Excited to talk a little bit about hydrogen and kind of the future of hydrogen energizing our state here as we kind of commit to our goals of kind of transitioning. Kind of for our listeners who don't know a lot about H Cycle, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, happy to. We're a development company that will be operating hydrogen production facilities. We have a flagship facility that we're looking to establish in Pittsburgh, California. We like to say that we're on the cusp of putting the H back in Pittsburgh. I know it's a bad joke, but
Yeah.
kind of rings true. As well as some other potential sites across the state. We're also a member organization in the Arches Hydrogen Hub, and we're very excited about that. But essentially, our process is going to be using organic waste feedstock and being able to transition that organic waste into hydrogen. And we can get a little bit more into it as we go.
Yeah, so basically, as I understand it, you kind of nicely said that you're going to take, livestock poop and make it into energy, right?
Well, not necessarily, not us. And
No.
so
Okay.
we're right. And so we'll be taking your organic waste. So think of, your recycling bin, right?
Hmm.
Uh, People throw all kinds of things into those bins. We're still trying to figure out how to do that correctly. But what it does sometimes is it contaminates the material, making it non-recyclable. And so normally that material will either get composted or would be put through anaerobic digestion after it's separated at a separation facility. Because it's contaminated, you can't necessarily put that through anaerobic digestion processes or compost it. And so invariably what will happen is that material will then get sent to the local landfills where it will essentially just sit and rot, and that creates the big methane problem that we're trying to address right now. And so, what H Cycle can do is we can actually take that material that's been contaminated, we put it through an additional separation process to remove any further contaminants out of that organic waste material. And then we, through a heating thermal conversion process that's non combustion, so we're non incinerated, but we do heat it to temperatures that breaks down that material to its compound level. And we're able to extract the hydrogen, which we hope to then provide to the heavy duty trucking sector. Think of your local ports that has very uh, goods movement, heavy duty equipment that we're trying to transition to a much cleaner fleet
Hmm.
and be able to supply the clean hydrogen resource to those hard to decarbonize industries that are looking for solutions to try and transition.
Yeah, that's interesting. So basically, you're taking our waste, our garbage, and making it into energy, right?
You know, if you would have told me years ago that I'd be in the trash business after the career I've had, I'd probably laugh at you. But here I am, and yes,
Yeah.
that's precisely the case. Is taking the stuff that otherwise would essentially go to your landfill and being able to do something positive with it. So we're attacking two problems at the same time and producing a third solution that I think we all care about. And that's
Yeah.
clean air, obviously.
And kind of what's the scale out there? Like, what's the possibilities if you got all the landfills and all this in the state? Like, how much hydrogen could you produce per year?
That's a very interesting question. I'm told that one eight cycle facility could produce up to think about 60 to 70 truck or 30 to 40, I would say, truckloads per day, which would equal about 700 to 800 tons potentially of hydrogen per day that we could produce. And then you multiply that across the year. So quite a bit, but still not enough to actually make a dent, I think, in California's not only waste, but also energy industry that needs to rely on hydrogen. Think about your refineries that are very big facilities that need a lot of power to actually refine the crude oil
Hmm.
that uses hydrogen, but most of that hydrogen is based off of fossil based sources. While we could be a solution to that, there's no way we'll produce enough to be able to transition that industry completely. So we think of ourselves as kind of a complement to a lot of these processes and another tool in the toolkit, if you will, for California to be able to leverage and start to incentivize a little bit more quickly transitioning to a much more cleaner and efficient economy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Your company's basically kind of taken on two problems, right? One problem is the landfill and the waste it emits as the methane decomposes and adds to the carbon dioxide. The second is you're kind of taking that and kind of transforming it into a clean energy source, which can be used in kind of vehicles that are also polluting. Can you kind of talk
That's
to
right.
us about kind of the landfill issue and kind of
Yeah.
why that needs to be tackled and kind of how you're tackling that?
Well, look, I think, there was just a report in the LA Times a couple of days ago, I think I read, where they had a local landfill that was having a problem with some waste there that it was actually catching and burning uh, on site and emitting odors and gaseous substances that were making residents sick. And so, it's kind of two kind of problems. We have to put the waste somewhere, right?
Right.
And so we need the landfills for that purpose. But invariably, we also have to think about how to reduce the amount, right? And so through SB 1383, which was the short lived climate pollutant bill, which is facilitated by Cal Recycle, they are looking at ways to incentivize landfill diversion practices to try and reduce the amount of waste going to those landfills to address that kind of problem. And so, H Cycle, we see ourselves as a potential partner and solution in helping to address those particular issues for that very reason. Not only to divert the waste that otherwise would go to that landfill and create those problems, but not only do you reduce that waste, but then you can address the clean air issues, mitigate pollution impacts to communities that may be close to these landfills, and as you just stated, produce a resource that can be helpful in those hard to decarbonize industries.
Mhm. A lot of this
Like,
often comes down to, like, economics, kinda like, what are the economics of kinda H cycle and kinda the end fuel result to I guess, the consumer?
well, the industry that we're actually looking at is not your commercial fleet at this point, and so we're focused on the heavy duty trucking sector.
Mhm.
And so the incentive there is for a lot of large trucking fleets to incentivize a transition to hydrogen fuel cell trucking. And so that's going to be the primary customer base for us as we move along. Now, there's some talk about, the infrastructure being built out, some investment and some hydrogen fuel stations that will be built out. And so as that infrastructure begins to grow and maybe the consumer market begins to change in some regard, I think EVs are still kind of at the top of the tent pole when you talk about clean energy vehicles that are matriculating onto the roadways there. But there will be a place for a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. And certainly as that market, I think, picks up and complements the EV market with battery electric, maybe at that point we'll be in a position where we then can supply fuel source to the commercial market for those commercial vehicles. But at this point, we're just focused on the heavy duty trucking sector. your ports, refineries, those really big industrial
Mhm.
sectors that are going to need a lot of clean energy and a lot of clean hydrogen to be able to continue to maintain their processes, but do it in a much more cleaner and efficient way.
Yeah, we were just talking with Assembly Member Mike Gibson, and he just had
Yeah.
a special committee on the ports, and he was talking about how the ports and California and how important they are. Kind of what is the undertaking of greenifying these ports and kind of getting these heavy duty trucks transitioning from diesel to hydrogen.
It's a huge undertaking. Just think about if you're familiar with the Long Beach port, right? And so right now we do have a RFI in with the port for a potential project down there. We're hopeful to be considered amongst the number of hydrogen projects they're considering down there. But just if you're familiar with the area, you have the 710 corridor. We've heard a lot of legislators who represent those particular areas talk about the problem with that. If you've ever been on the 710, then you
Yeah.
know that I mean, them trucks are just lined up, man. And at times, if there's traffic, they're just sitting, they're just idling. And if you look over to your right or to your left, there's parks, there's houses right off
Mhm.
of that corridor. And so a lot of that pollutionary impact as a result of that diesel is impacting those communities. And so being able to again be a tool in a toolkit that can provide a fuel source to help to transition those vehicles to hydrogen fuel cell, the clean air benefit to those communities are going to be well affected. I think they're going to benefit immensely from that transition, but it is a huge undertaking because there's so many and there's so much volume that comes through the ports. So, this is an effort that certainly is going to take some time. It's not anything that's going to be completed overnight, but the important part is to begin. And
Mhm.
so, we have to make sure that we do have a provider at the port that can actually be efficient, cost efficient for those producers and for the trucking industry to be able to leverage the economic incentives for them to start to transition their fleets, and not just the trucking industry, but the port itself and some of the drayage trucking and some of the equipment that they're going to be looking to both electrify in some instances, but also use hydrogen in some other instances. And at some point, there'll be maritime supply as well to be able to supply those ships that we see in those ports with hydrogen. And so the future is bright, if you will. There's a lot of potential and a lot of excitement there, but we're just at the cusp, I think,
Right.
of being able to really fortify that industry. And this is why the investments that are being made right now in hydrogen, the policies that are being debated right now and discussed to ensure that this nascent industry can grow are incredibly important because
Yeah.
in order for us to do those transitions the way that we need to, not only to meet our own objectives, but just to align with kind of the momentum in addressing climate change, you need to have solutions for those hard to decarbonize industries that are cost efficient, cost effective, if you will, and that makes sense.
Yeah, can you dig into a little more? Like, I know Tesla has what their big semi truck. Have seen it here at the Capitol. They had a Green Energy Day. Kind of,
Yeah.
why do the economics for heavy duty trucking favor hydrogen over electricity?
Well, a lot of it is the cost of the batteries. It's just incredibly expensive. And the technology is just not advanced enough yet. There have been some electric trucks that are on market, but the cost of redoing an entire fleet, it's just in terms of its cost effectiveness, the price point is just not there for a lot of industries, a lot of your trucking companies to be able to transition their fleets in a way that economically makes sense for them. And so, because hydrogen can be produced in a fuel efficient kind of way as a fuel source, it's much more cost effective to be able to transition instead to hydrogen fuel cell. And so, we have a lot of trucking companies who see the potential of like what an H cycle can produce, like a Hyzon, for example, who are very supportive of what we're attempting and trying to do because they see for them and wanting to transition their fleets to hydrogen fuel cell, the economics just bear out a lot better for them in the long run.
Yeah. Is it can you tell us a little more about H Cycle's business plan? Is it a complete, we'll make the hydrogen at the landfill and also kind of like a fueling station as well? Is that kind of the
Well, we won't
concept?
be at the landfill. We're actually going to be, so think of your waste management companies. They
Hmm.
go and they pick up the material, right?
Right.
And the recycled material, they take it to wherever the local, we call it a MRF, it's your recycling plant. Take it to your local MRF to have it recycled. That material then, instead of the material that's contaminated being sent to the landfill, they can bring it to us. And so we're going to have trucks bringing that material to an H cycle facility, tipping it or dropping off the load, if you will, in an enclosed facility. And it's enclosed for a reason because we want to make sure that we are addressing odor concerns, noise concerns, those type of deals, and being able to then put it through a conveyor process, another recycling process, and put it through our process to create the hydrogen. So we won't be on site at a landfill, which is why we're in alignment with the landfill diversion
Hmm.
process, and hopefully we'll qualify for that credit. Being able to, instead of having that waste go there, bring it to us, and then we can kind of process it at an H cycle facility.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of all dealing with this kind of like new recycling world where you got to take your food and you can put your food in your lawn clippings now, and what you
Yeah.
can put in your recycling. Just kind of dive into what are the possibilities of things you can take and turn into hydrogen? Is it the grass clippings? Is it the food? Is it the paper product? What's the main
I
staple?
mean, it's pretty much everything that you just said. I mean,
Okay.
it's food waste, it's wood chips, it's paper. I mean, there are a lot of potential waste products that you can take and that you convert. Now, what separates us is that, we think composting is good. And so we don't want the stuff that actually can be leveraged and used for composting. We think it's great to be able to take some of that organic waste material, compost that. It's great for farmers. It's great for you if you have a community garden or your own garden, to be able to have access to clean compost to be able to leverage and use. So, we see ourselves as a complement, if you will, which is why the Compost Coalition supports H Cycle as well. Instead, we want to take the stuff that, in other words, can't be leveraged in that way. So, what you just mentioned kind of contaminates a lot of the organic material that could be composted. We want to take that and we want to leverage that and produce hydrogen from that source.
Mhm. One of the criticisms about hydrogen is it kind of like takes a lot of energy to make it. Kind of how are your H cycle facilities powered, and kind of how does it make I guess energy sense?
Right. And so you have there's a very strong debate that's going on right now, both here in state and out of state, about the best ways to produce it. There are some who favor an electrolysis kind of base way of doing it and using pure electricity to type of produce the hydrogen. It's a very intensive kind of process, and it is very expensive to do it that way. Instead, what we do is think of kind of like a boiler, if you will. That's kind of the source we use. Hopefully, we can leverage clean resources to be able to do that. We heat the boiler, which then heats the thermal conversion chamber, which is our technology, and then that way we can break that down. It's less energy intensive, and in fact, because of the resources, the clean energy resources we'll be trying to leverage to be able to be a part of that process, our carbon intensity score will actually be lower than some of your electrolysis based practices. And so, we think there's a role for electrolysis. I think that's efficient, that's good, but it is very intensive, it's very expensive. Our way of doing it is not as expensive, and it's actually um, a much more kind of cleaner way of producing the hydrogen. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not an engineer, so don't quote me on any of this. Do your own research, those of you out there.
Right.
But the way that we produce it is different from electrolysis in the sense that we're not using that kind of very intense kind of method to produce the hydrogen.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the hydrogen hub and kind of what that entails?
Yeah, it's a private partner, public partnership that California, thankfully, of a number of stakeholders, companies, et cetera, who see the value in hydrogen for hydrogen future, decided to come together and talk about what a hub or essentially a number of potential projects throughout the state would look like that could qualify for federal grants from the Department of Energy. The Biden administration, through the IRA, uh, leveraged an investment into potential hydrogen projects. And so you had a number of states put together these public private partnerships between government and private sector businesses like our own to determine what kind of shovel ready or what kind of projects you have in hopper that could be beneficial and produced relatively quickly, if you will, in the next few years or so, to help start moving us faster towards that clean energy economy and moving us away from fossil fueling. So there are a number of companies that are in the hub here in California. It's in collaboration with the governor's office through the Office of GoBiz and some other public entities as well, both locally. And we put together a proposal that thankfully the feds thought was a great idea, and they awarded California. It's up to I think 1.5 billion
Wow.
in potential resourcing. That is still being worked out what the final numbers are going to look like, but we're very excited to be partnering both with government and also, with the Newsom administration and with many of our uh, allies and colleagues in the private sector that are
Yeah.
looking to try and do this.
It seems
So
like,
it's very exciting.
yeah, I've been hearing about hydrogen vehicles for like 30 years. And then,
You
10
and I
years
both.
ago, we finally got, EVs started coming out and everyone thought that was kind of crazy. And now they're pretty mainstream. You're seeing a lot of EVs coming around. We've
Yeah.
seen some early hydrogen cars coming. Kind of what's the next 10 years look like for hydrogen?
That's a very good question. I think we're all trying to figure that out. I think there are a set of uh, regulations that are being considered right now, some of which are a federal tax credit that Department of Energy and Treasury is working on right now that have yet to be released. That certainly is going to have an effect on the economics of hydrogen projects as we move forward. You have CARB here in California, released, I believe, today, as a matter of fact. I'll be talking to some folks about it in short order, but a suite of changes to the low carbon fuel standard that certainly will have an effect on potential hydrogen projects moving forward here in the state. And so, as long as those regulations aren't too stringent or narrow, but have an amount of flexibility, have important guardrails to make sure they can hold these companies and us accountable as we move forward. But as long as they're broad enough to ensure that the economics work on the development side, because building these facilities obviously are not cheap, and you need the capital and the investment capital to be able to do it. So the right signals have to be sent to the market.
Right.
As long as they're in alignment with supporting this industry and providing a strong foundation economically with which development can move forward, both in terms of the cost, but also in terms of the permitting side. Um, then I think in 10 years, we're going to be much closer to meeting that 2045 goal that we've set for ourselves, maybe even closer. You will see, I think, more hydrogen fuel cell commercial vehicles, but I really think where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck and where you're going to see the most change is in the hard to decarbonize industries, the heavy duty sector. CARB released its heavy duty clean vehicle trucking rule. And I think that you're going to see the transition there first.
Right.
So in 10 years, you're going to see more EVs, more battery electric. That's kind of, the top of the sphere, if you will, in terms of commercial vehicles that are clean and efficient. You'll start to see some hydrogen fuel cell commercial vehicles matriculate into the market. Of course, this is dependent on infrastructure. with more hydrogen fuel cell fueling stations being erected and put into service. But I think the biggest transition you're going to see is in the goods movement in the heavy duty sector, and particularly heavy duty trucking.
Right. Well, the future sounds bright for you and H Cycle. Kind of what if some of our listeners want to find some more information about your company? What's the best way to kind of check that out?
Yeah, you feel free to check us out. We have a website. It's simple, www.hcycle.com. You can find us as well. And certainly you can email me, quentin.foster@hcycle.com. And you'll be hearing about us hopefully relatively soon in Pittsburgh, California, establishing our first H cycle facility there. So we're very excited about working with the state to meet its goals.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us and look forward to some of the work you guys are going to do, putting the H back in Pittsburgh. So,
With the H back in Pittsburgh and
yeah,
elsewhere too, hopefully. I appreciate it.
all
Thank you
right.
for the
Thanks,
time.
Quentin. Have a good one.